After Hitler had taken his life on April 30th, 1945, Propaganda Minister Joseph Goebbels briefly assumed control as Chancellor, marking the existence of the so-called Third Reich's second cabinet. He ended his life one day later. So what instructions did Goebbels give during his short-lived rule as Chancellor? This here is the story of the Goebbels government. Hey, good to have you back on the channel. My name is Stefan, I'm a Dutch history teacher and I love to talk about history and explore these niche historical topics. Subscribe if you have not already and hit that notification bell. And you can also support me financially. For example, you can buy me a coffee via buymeacoffee.com. So, Goebbels functioned just over a day as Chancellor. But him succeeding Hitler was very unlikely before, because Hitler's second man till 1941 was Rudolf Hess. After that it became Hermann Göring. And what about the SS chief Heinrich Himmler? Let's explore these last days of the crumbling Third Reich in the final moments of World War II in Europe. Dr. Joseph Goebbels had been Reichsminister of Public Enlightenment and Propaganda since 1933. He was never on the roll for succeeding Hitler. When 1945 came around, Nazi Germany was facing defeat. The Soviets were well on their way for invading East Prussia, and the Western Allies marched into Germany from the west as Hitler was deteriorating physically. Goebbels' fierce speeches were meant to keep the population behind the war effort. While Hitler became a shadow of his former self, the so-called poisoned dwarf, Joseph Goebbels, kept on the fiery rhetoric up until the last weeks of the war as Gauleiter of Berlin.
Dass unsere Soldaten, wenn sie jetzt an diesem oder an jenem Teil der Ostfront zur Offensive antreten, keinen Pardon mehr kennen und keinen Pardon mehr geben. Jene Divisionen, die jetzt schon zu kleinen Offensiven angetreten sind und in den nächsten Wochen und Monaten zu Großoffensiven antreten werden.
Hitler's voice was last heard in public via the radio on the 30th of January, which marked the 12th anniversary of his ascension to power. In March 1945, Hitler appeared for the last time in public decorating some youth soldiers. Goebbels did much more. Apart from continuing speeches via the radio, he also visited the front on several occasions. On the 8th of March, he visited the front in Silesia, where troops commanded by General Führer had recaptured the town of Lauban. In the marketplace of the town, he gave a speech. He admired Führer, not the least because of his draconian policy of hanging deserters and leaving their bodies on display in public. Goebbels was shown in Lauban talking with a 16-year-old Hitler youth who had been awarded the Iron Cross. He later wrote in his diary, "When I arrive home, the whole house is in darkness. A lighting cable has again been broken. A gloomy and somewhat melancholy evening. Magda, Goebbels' wife, has gone to Dresden to visit Frau von Arendt. One can get quite depressed in hours like these. Above all, when I put this question to myself, what should I do to get that which I know to be right to be actually carried through? I feel in myself a great moral and national responsibility to the German Volk, in that I am one of the few who even now have the air of the Führer. A possibility like this must be used in all ways, but I really cannot do more than I am doing." To Hitler, Goebbels argued for a heroic last stand in the German capital Berlin that soon would become a battlefield, an idea that appealed to Hitler. When US President Franklin D. Roosevelt passed away on April 12th, Goebbels argued it would break the alliance between the Western Allies and the Soviets, and that the war might soon swing into Germany's favor. While other Nazi leaders brought their family to safety in southern Germany, Goebbels remained with his family in Berlin. On the 12th of April, Hitler celebrated his last birthday. Several senior leaders came visit him in his bunker in Berlin to congratulate him. They then got out of the city because on that same day the Soviets reached the outskirts of Berlin. So Hitler's successor since 1941 was Luftwaffe commander Hermann Göring. He fell out of grace because he wrongly assumed power on the 23rd of April, which resulted in his house arrest. Then there was also Heinrich Himmler, the feared SS chef. But when it appears that he has secretly contacted the British, Hitler ordered him arrested on the 28th of April. Yet Himmler got away with his personal bodyguards and tried to make it to Flensburg, where Admiral Dönitz was setting up a new government. Goebbels remained loyal at the side of his master. By the 29th of April, it was clear that the government cadre they were in would soon fall into the hands of the Soviets. A hodgepodge of SS troops, Wehrmacht units and Volkssturmmen held on to the cadre. By midnight, Hitler married his girlfriend Eva Braun in his bunker. Then Hitler dictated his last will and testimony. Hitler's last act as head of state was breaking up the position of Führer into different positions. Goebbels became Reichschancellor, Admiral Karl Dönitz became Reichspräsident, Martin Bormann became party minister. Despite Hitler wanting Goebbels to leave Berlin, Goebbels categorically refused this order and remained put in the bunker. Goebbels then dictated a short appendix which was attached to Hitler's last testament, in which he explained why he could not accept the Führer's order. For the first time in my life, I must categorically refuse to obey an order of the Führer. My wife and children stand by this refusal. First, we would never find it in our hearts, from human considerations and from considerations of personal loyalty, to leave the Führer alone in his hour of greatest need. Second, I would for the rest of my life be known as a dishonorable apostate and a common blackguard who had lost all self-esteem and also the respect of his Volk. I believe that thereby I perform a better service to the future of the German Volk, for which in the coming difficult times examples will be more important than men. In the afternoon, on April 30th, Hitler and Eva Braun took their lives. With Hitler now dead, Goebbels as Reichschancellor remained in the bunker as the new government decided on a course of action. By that time, Red Army troops were only a few hundred meters away from the bunker. The military situation was beyond hopeless. The bodies of Hitler and Eva Braun were put in a crater, doused with gasoline and set alight as Bormann and Goebbels gave their final salutes. What followed was a confused period of 24 hours where Goebbels and his wife decided what to do. In the morning after the death of Hitler, Goebbels seemed to have said to SS officer Heinz Linge, "I have also decided to bring my life to an end, but it is a very difficult moment." Others in the bunker, among which Bormann, were determined to escape. Goebbels also made an attempt to negotiate with the Soviets. On the night of the 30th of April to the 1st of May, Goebbels sent General Krebs, Hitler's last chief of the General Staff, to the headquarters of General Chuikov, commander of the Soviet 8th Guards Army, with instructions to negotiate the surrender of Berlin and a safe passage for all those remaining in the bunker. Chuikov left a detailed account of his negotiations with Krebs, who was a Russian speaker by the way, in his later memoir, and from this we can try to deduce the intentions of Goebbels. So Krebs arrived at Chuikov's command post at 3:50 a.m. on the 1st of May and stayed for some 12 hours. He carried with him several documents, among which a message from Goebbels, which read as follows. In accordance with the testament of the departed Führer, we empower General Krebs as follows. We inform the leader of the Soviet people that today at 15 hours 30 minutes the Führer voluntarily quitted his life. On the basis of his legal right, the Führer in the testament he left behind him transmitted all power to Dönitz, to myself and Bormann. I am empowered by Bormann to establish contact with the leader of the Soviet people. This contact is essential for peace talks between the powers which have borne the heaviest losses. Goebbels. It is curious why Goebbels felt the need to write he was authorized by Bormann, especially since the following talks, Krebs consistently emphasized Goebbels was acting in Hitler's stead. Through Krebs, Goebbels requested the Soviets to allow a new German government to be formed, to negotiate more favorable peace terms between the two nations. But this was unrealistic. The Soviets had no reason to make any concessions to the remnants of the German leadership, and on his superiors' orders, Chuikov insisted on nothing short of an unconditional surrender. Around noon on May 1st, Krebs left the HQ of Chuikov and returned to the bunker to consult Goebbels. Whether Goebbels still imagined a future for himself as the head of a German government in talks with the Soviets, or if he had already resolved to end his own life and that of his family, even in the unlikely event that the Soviets agreed to negotiate, remains a mystery. In the afternoon on May 1st, Goebbels dispatched a telegram to Dönitz announcing Hitler's death and informing him about his new position. Goebbels' children were apparently killed using cyanide capsules after being sedated with morphine. Shortly after, Goebbels and Magda left for the Chancellery garden, where they took their own lives. Also, their bodies were doused with gasoline and set alight, yet there was not enough fuel, and as a result, their bodies were recognizable for the Soviets. The following day, Soviet forces entered the abandoned bunker, discovering the bodies of Goebbels and his wife, several officers, including Krebs, and the 6 children. With this, civil government in Berlin had come to an end. On the 2nd of May 1945, German commander Helmut Weitling surrendered to the Soviets. But the surrender of Berlin was not the end of Nazi Germany, because it continued to exist, not in Berlin, but in Flensburg, under Karl Dönitz. I made a video on just that. Click here and click here to find out why the Germans fought till the bitter end. I see you later.